Imagine waking up every day to find an anonymous gift on your doorstep. A hot coffee. A pastry. The only thread of hope in your ruined life. For months, she clung to this mystery. But what Sarah discovered wasn't a guardian angel. It was the son of the man who ordered her husband's death. The grief that separated them was the only thing connecting them. She hated him. He protected her. And both were about to be burned alive by the secret he carried. This is the story of Sarah and Ethan. Where a kiss was born from the ashes. And where redemption wasn't bought with money, but with the soul. Stay with us, because you'll discover that some loves are impossible until forgiveness arrives. The morning broke gray over Eastwood Heights. A fine rain descended lazily over the narrow streets and the sidewalks still wet from the night before. The kitchen clock read 5:42 a.m. when Sarah Miller, 37, climbed out of bed. The old coffee maker hissed by the sink, the radio played an old Carole King tune, and for a moment, the sound of a motorcycle stopping outside made her heart race. It wasn't the first time. For months, when she opened the door of the small townhouse where she lived with her 2 children, she found a cup of hot coffee and 2 pastries wrapped in a napkin. No note. No sound. No explanation. Sarah had tried to convince herself it was a mistake, a gesture from some generous neighbor. But the coffee was always the same aroma, the same temperature, the same time. As if whoever left it knew exactly when she woke up. Since the death of Ryan, her husband, 3 years earlier, Sarah had learned to survive on little. She worked as a house cleaner, looking after properties in gated communities, returning late, exhausted. His loss, murdered during a robbery at a gas station, had left a deep wound and a life filled with silence. That morning, however, the silence felt heavier. She opened the door slowly. There were the cup and the pastries, wrapped in a clean cloth. But this time, there was something different, a small message, written in firm, discreet handwriting. Forgive me for continuing to do this. I only want your days to start less empty. Sarah stood still, the note trembling between her fingers. The smell of the coffee seemed more intense, almost painful. Who would write something like that? She tucked the paper into her pocket and, at that very instant, made a decision. The next night, she would stay awake. She wanted to see the man, or the memory, that left that gesture every dawn. Night fell heavy. The neighborhood slept early, only the corner bar and the distant sound of a truck broke the silence. Sarah sat on the sofa, lights off, her eyes fixed on the door. The digital clock flashed 3:57 a.m. when she heard the motorcycle engine again. The headlight illuminated the street. A man got off, wearing a black jacket and a helmet covering his face. He walked slowly to the porch and placed the cup and pastries on the step, with the same calm as always. But when he turned to leave, Sarah threw the door open. Who are you? The man stopped, surprised. For a moment, the sound of the rain seemed to cease. He slowly removed his helmet. The face that emerged under the streetlight made Sarah's blood run cold. Ethan Hayes, he said, his voice husky, almost a whisper. Sarah recoiled a step. I know who you are. You're the son of the station owner, the man who called the shots that night. Ethan lowered his gaze. I know, he replied calmly. And I also know that my family's name ruined yours. She took a deep breath, her chest burning. What are you doing here? Why? Because 3 years ago, I found out the truth about what happened to your husband. He took a step forward, without getting too close. And since then, I haven't slept in peace. The next morning, Sarah didn't go to work. She spent the day sitting at the table, looking at the note and trying to understand what she had heard. The Hayes name carried weight throughout the city. The family owned half the gas stations in the region and was known for its political connections. Ethan's father, Arthur Hayes, had died 2 years ago, but had left a legacy stained by corruption and fear. Ryan, Sarah's husband, had been a manager at one of the chain stations. On the night of the crime, he witnessed fuel embezzlement and reported the scheme. Hours later, he was found dead in the yard. The investigation never moved forward. And now the son of the man responsible for everything was there, bringing coffee and bread. That afternoon, the intercom rang. Sarah answered cautiously. "It's Ethan," the voice said. "I just want to talk." She hesitated, but opened the gate. He wasn't wearing his jacket, just a simple shirt and the look of someone carrying more weight than his shoulders could bear. "I know nothing I say will change how you feel," he began. "But my father didn't order your husband killed. He covered up for the person who did." Sarah crossed her arms. "How does that change anything?" "It changes the fact that there's someone alive who needs to pay for what they did." Ethan pulled an aged folder from his pocket and placed it on the table. Inside, copies of old emails, reports, and messages. "I found this among the company papers. The man's name is Victor Vance, a former security guard. He was the one who pulled the trigger." She looked at the pages, disbelief washing over her. "Why are you showing me this?" "Because your husband was killed for protecting the truth, and I'm here to finish it." The news spread fast, as everything does in modern times. It only took someone taking a picture of Ethan entering Sarah's building for comments to erupt on the neighborhood's social media. The widow and the killer's son. Some women have no self-respect. He must be buying forgiveness with cheap coffee. Sarah tried to ignore it. But public judgment is like a dirty tide, it invades even the cracks you thought were protected. Ethan, on the other hand, seemed unfazed. He continued to visit her discreetly, helping with the process of reopening the case, accompanying her to the courthouse, and bringing, without asking permission, the same coffee on cold mornings. With time, the gesture stopped being strange and became a point of light in her routine. There was something different about him, a silent sadness, a type of pain that seemed to converse with hers. One night, while reviewing the papers, Sarah asked, "Why do you care so much?" He took a moment to answer. "Because I lost someone too. And I didn't have the courage to fight for justice like you." "Who?" she asked. "My mother. She died believing my father was an honest man." Silence took over the room. Two solitudes recognized each other without needing words. The case made local headlines. Businessman's son exposes fraud in fuel network. The name Victor Vance reappeared, and with it, the danger. One night, when Sarah returned from work, she noticed the gate was ajar. The living room light flickered. Upon entering, she found a torn note on the table, coffee spilled on the floor, and the smell of smoke in the air. On the note, just 2 words written in anger, "Shut up." She ran to the window and saw a black car turning the corner. She called Ethan without thinking. "They were here," she said, breathless. "I figured they would do this," he replied. "Stay calm, I'm on my way." That night, he slept on her sofa, like a guard, without asking permission. When she woke up, the coffee was ready. And, for the first time in years, Sarah drank coffee without fear of tomorrow. The news of the attack spread quickly in the neighborhood. Neighbors whispered on the sidewalks, the curious gathered in front of the gate, and Sarah, embarrassed, tried to pretend nothing had happened. But deep down, she knew, this wasn't just any warning. It was a real threat. Ethan insisted she leave for a few days. "You don't understand, Sarah. Victor is dangerous. He has nothing left to lose." "And you think I do?" she replied firmly. "I've already lost everything. I won't run from my own house because of a coward." He sighed. "Then I'll stay here. At least until we resolve this." She wanted to protest, but gave up. There was something in his gaze that mixed protection and regret, an intensity that disarmed her. In the following days, the routine changed. Ethan started fixing the locks, replacing light bulbs, tidying the garden. Small gestures that, without realizing it, made Sarah feel alive again. At night, while the children slept, they talked on the porch. They spoke of the past, of losses, of dreams that no longer existed. Once, Sarah asked, "Do you believe in fate?" He thought before answering. "I believe fate is what's left when you get everything wrong, and yet still want to get it right." She smiled. And for the first time in a long time, she truly smiled. Days later, Ethan received an anonymous envelope. Inside, an old, yellowed photograph showing Ryan and Victor at the same station, years before the crime. On the back, a handwritten phrase, "The past never dies. It just changes address." He took the photo to Sarah. When she saw it, she turned pale. This photo was taken on Ryan's birthday. "I remember that uniform." She stopped speaking, her gaze fixed on a detail. "What is it?" Ethan asked. "That mark." She pointed to Victor's arm in the photo. "That tattoo. I've seen it before." Sarah stood up, went to the bedroom, and returned with an old notebook. Between the pages was a torn receipt, signed by a V. Vance, dated 2 days before the murder. "He was here," she whispered. "Ryan told me a security guard had come to borrow money. He said he was going to sort out a problem." Ethan carefully took the paper. "This is enough to reopen the case." But what neither of them knew was that someone was listening to that conversation, parked on the corner, inside a car with its headlights off. Ethan returned to his father's old company headquarters, now abandoned. The deactivated fuel plant still smelled of oil and rust. He entered through the side and found the office locked, but recently broken into. Someone had been there before. On the desk, a note wet from the rain, "You should have left the past alone." He rushed out, but before reaching the car, he heard the click of a lighter. A second later, the fire started. Flames climbed the walls, swallowing the old archives, the memories, and the Hayes family name. Ethan managed to get out, coughing, his face covered in soot. When he arrived at Sarah's house, she ran to meet him, desperate. "What happened to you?" "The past," he replied, breathless. "It's trying to burn me alive." That night, while he rested with his arm bandaged, Sarah watched him sleep on the sofa. The flames had taken almost everything that remained of the Hayes empire. And, paradoxically, it was there, in the ashes of what had once separated them, that something impossible to contain was born. Sarah sat down beside him. The silence in the house was deep. She rested her hand on his, and he slowly opened his eyes. "You should rest," he murmured. "And you should stop protecting me," she replied gently. Their eyes met. It was an encounter between guilt, forgiveness, and promises that no one dared to make out loud. He slowly stood up, and before any words could emerge, the distance between them simply ceased to exist. It was a slow, hesitant, but true kiss. A kiss that said everything reason would never allow. When they separated, Sarah had tears in her eyes. "This shouldn't have happened." "I know. But it did." The following days were tense. The police, based on the evidence Ethan provided, reopened the case. But Victor had disappeared. One morning, Sarah received an anonymous call. A husky, muffled voice said only, "The boss's son will pay the same way the widow's husband did." The panic returned. She tried to warn Ethan, but his phone was out of range. That night, the house was plunged into silence. Only the wind hitting the windows and the distant sound of a motorcycle broke the air. Suddenly, the doorbell rang. Sarah ran, her heart racing. But it wasn't Ethan. It was Victor. "Miss Sarah, miss me," he said, with a twisted smile. "You and the young man have been messing where you shouldn't." She tried to close the door, but he pushed hard. A bottle of cleaning alcohol fell from her cleaning bag, spilling onto the floor. He pulled out the lighter. Fire solves everything. But before he could light it, Ethan appeared in the doorway, coming from the street. There was a struggle, screams, and the metallic sound of a gun falling to the ground. Victor stumbled, the lighter ignited, and the flames spread quickly. Sarah and Ethan managed to get out, but the fire took over the living room. Victor was trapped inside, and the roar of the fire swallowed the past once and for all. The fire department arrived minutes later. Ethan was taken to the hospital with minor burns. Sarah sat on the sidewalk, covered by a blanket, watching the fire consume what was left of the house. A police officer approached. Mrs. Miller, we found something on the aggressor's body. He handed her a soot-covered necklace. Inside, there was a photo of Victor and a small child. She looked at it for long seconds. Everyone carries a pain the world doesn't see, she murmured. But some turn pain into hatred. Days later, the case was closed. Ryan's name was officially cleared. Ethan sold what was left of the family assets and donated most of it to an institute supporting widows and orphans of urban crimes. Then, he disappeared without saying goodbye. Sarah went back to sewing. She tried to move on. But every morning, upon opening the door, she looked at the ground and found herself waiting, without admitting it, for a cup of coffee and 2 pastries. A year passed. And on a cold morning, the sun still rising between the buildings, she opened the door and held her breath. There it was. A cup of hot coffee. 2 pastries wrapped in a napkin. And a note. Some debts are paid with money. Others, with the soul. Mine can only be paid with love. She smiled, tears streaming down her face. The smell of the coffee was the same as always. And for the first time, it no longer hurt. Some loves are born from chance, others from encounters. But the rarest are born from forgiveness. And forgiveness, when true, transforms even guilt into a path. Sarah opened a small cafe in the neighborhood, christened Dawn's Hope Cafe. On the wall, an old photo, a cup of coffee, 2 pastries, and a hand-painted phrase, every new beginning starts with a simple gesture. And so, what began with a mystery, ended with redemption. Not like in fairy tales, but like in real life, where love doesn't erase the past, it just teaches you to keep walking, even when the ground is burning. The story of Sarah and Ethan shows us that true forgiveness isn't forgetting, it's having the courage to rewrite the future in the ashes of the past. The anonymous coffee transformed into Dawn's Hope Cafe, proving that the simplest gesture, done with truth, can heal the deepest wounds. Ethan paid his debt not with money, but with his soul, and Sarah recovered her right to live. If you were moved by this journey of pain and overcoming, be sure to become part of our community. Subscribe to the channel so you don't miss other heartwarming stories, hit the notification bell, and share this video with anyone who needs a dose of hope today. Leave a comment, would you have Sarah's courage to forgive the son of your tormentor? We really want to know your opinion. Until the next story, and remember, love blooms where courage allows.